Bienvenidos a Casa Asia. Somos la principal institución de diplomacia pública en España dedicada a la región de Asia-Pacífico. Desde 2001, acercando la realidad asiática.
Buenos días. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos hoy. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very happy to host this event here in Casa Asia with the collaboration of Casa Árabe. For us, I think I'm going to be very brief, I wanted to welcome you and to make sure that you realize the importance that is the event of today. And the generosity of the panelists that are joining us today. They have been through a very hard couple of days here in Madrid, with the hearings that took place in the Colegio de Abogados de Madrid, hearing the testimonies of survivors, and I think I'm sure it has been emotionally exhausting. So I want to thank them, especially for the generosity to share this event with us today. I also want to thank you because being here, it shows our support, I think, to this process, to this quest of justice that you are looking for. And I think it's very important to let them know that we are supporting their fight. Of course, Casa Asia will be supporting and are completely committed and engaged with this process. They have our full support, and we will find it along the way and after it, whenever they need us. And they have also, for sure, our respect and our full admiration. I will give the floor to the moderator, to Rachel Reid, which is a former journalist of the BBC, and she's an expert she has been conducting research of the situation of human rights related to women in Afghanistan, and she will be introducing our panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Casa Asia and to Casa Árabe for hosting this event. They've been very gracious and patient as we worked out the logistics for this, happening alongside the tribunal. So it's really wonderful to be here, and thank you to all of you for coming and showing your support through your interest and attendance here today. So over the past 2 days at the People's Tribunal for the Women of Afghanistan, we've heard some harrowing, but also dignified and defiant testimony from Afghan women and girls, those inside Afghanistan whose voices we so rarely hear, and also those now in exile. We've heard from women who've been detained, who've been tortured and terrorized, who told us again and again that their crime was just that they were a woman. Some spoke of their careers as teachers or midwives being taken from them, whose hopes and dreams for their studies had been stolen from them. Some who would describe themselves as ordinary Afghans, but whose extraordinary courage drove them to the streets to resist the Taliban's authoritarian rule. One woman spoke of the night the Taliban came hammering at her door. She said that nobody had heard her screams. She threw herself from a window and said, "Even death did not give me refuge that night." Another spoke of how women have been silenced, how we're not living, we're only breathing. The Taliban may have tried to silence these women, but their voices and their stories were heard this week. And after this event, we'll return to the tribunal to hear the preliminary findings of a panel of 8 judges. The prosecutors, we have one of them here with us this morning, have presented evidence of crimes against humanity, of gender persecution, and more. But this was not a court of law. This is a civil society initiative, and people's tribunals have a storied history at moments when international justice institutions cannot or will not provide justice. So with you here today, we'll try to explain why this tribunal was brought into being and what outcomes are hoped for. And to do that, we've got two amazing Afghans who are behind the tribunal. On my right is Shahzad Akbar, the executive director of Rawadari, a human rights NGO. Shahzad was previously the chair of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission. She's worked in various capacities with civil society and the former government under the Republic. She's an extraordinary woman I've known for a long time. I'm actually on the board of Rawadari, so I've had the privilege of watching this process come into being for some time. And Azada Raz Mohammed is, as I say, one of the prosecutors at the People's Tribunal. She's also a legal advisor for the End Gender Apartheid campaign. And those of you, there's quite a few in the room who were at the tribunal this week, you'll have seen what an impressive job she's done as a prosecutor. And you'll see that she's got already 2 masters and a degree and a PhD on its way. And that was very much in evidence this week. She's currently doing her PhD at Melbourne Law School. I'm going to start with Shahzad. As I say, I've seen the build-up to this process. I know you were both driven to this, but also inspired. Tell us first about the context that drove you to feel that we needed the tribunal.
Thank you, Rachel. Warm greetings to all of you. Many thanks to colleagues from CASA Asia and CASA Arabe for hosting us here. And thanks to all of you for being here. It's wonderful to have a moment of reflection after what has been a very, very busy time, and also, as you mentioned, emotionally difficult time, but also rewarding time. So I think the idea of people's tribunals really grabbed our attention in Rawadari, at least. Following the fall of Kabul to the Taliban in 2021, and in 2022, we were watching Shadi Sadras here, we were watching Aban Tribunal. And that was actually my first introduction to people's tribunals. Aban Tribunal, organized by Iranian civil society, and the hearings were held in London, and I saw the emotional response from the Iranians to the process as well, and the fact that it could mobilize such public support. That idea became very appealing to us in Rawadari. And we have, of course, considering the horrific situation, women's rights situation in Afghanistan, we also work on all accountability mechanisms. Yeah, so we have, in case of Afghanistan, there has been an ongoing investigation by the International Criminal Court. Some of you might know that in July this year, we had 2 arrest warrants issued for the leaders of the Taliban through this process. There is an attempt, there was an announcement made in 2024 by 4 countries, Germany, Australia, Canada, and Netherlands, to potentially take Taliban to International Court of Justice for violations of CEDAW, the Convention for Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which is also, again, going to be historic in the sense that CEDAW has never been utilized in this way in support of women's rights as the most important convention on the rights of women. There is a special rapporteur on the human rights situation in Afghanistan, who has done Richard Bennett, who has done an amazing job of documenting the violations in Afghanistan and really being a strong voice at the international stage for the rights of women and girls in Afghanistan. And he has an ongoing mandate. And early this week has been a big week for justice for women of Afghanistan, because on Monday we had the resolution for creation of an independent investigative mechanism on Afghanistan, which would be something like the independent investigative mechanism on Myanmar, for instance, is another was an inspiration for this advocacy that has been going on for over 4 years. We have been trying to get this comprehensive investigative mechanism, which would essentially prepare case files that we can then follow up through universal jurisdiction or international tribunals, or even in the future domestic courts, to hold perpetrators accountable. And this would be for, in theory, and we are trying to make that happen, for all perpetrators. So there are a few accountability mechanisms. So what's the appeal of a people's tribunal in this context? Why a people's tribunal for women of Afghanistan? For us, there were a few reasons. One, there's unfortunately, despite the severity of the situation in Afghanistan, worsening. So we see a trend of worsening restriction on women's rights constantly in Afghanistan since August 2021. Despite this, we see normalization. particularly in the region, but also beyond that. We see normalization of the Taliban regime for a variety of reasons. Many countries care about, the three issues that they really care about is counterterrorism, counter-narcotics, and deportations or returning Afghans to Afghanistan. And women's rights and human rights is not on top of the agenda for them. So it's very convenient for them to try to normalize the situation in Afghanistan and to pretend that the violations that are happening in Afghanistan, despite the ICC arrest warrants, that they are happening for cultural or religious reasons. It's, their culture, they do what they do to their women sort of narrative. And it's none of our business. And this is horrific, because in July, when Russia recognized Taliban, they became the first country. It was also close to the ICC announcements. And I saw the wave of emotions that came from women and girls inside Afghanistan directly to our inboxes, our WhatsApp messages, our Facebooks. Feel completely forgotten and betrayed, but also to feel the perpetrators of violations against you recognized and normalized. So the People's Tribunal is that attempt to influence public opinion, to tell people the truth, to allow survivors to tell the true stories of Afghanistan. And we as activists always try to say this story to member states, but we also wanted, more importantly, the survivors to tell the story in their own words and from inside Afghanistan. And so this was a big, motivation for bringing this People's Tribunal together. But it's also about creating that moment. And in the past 2 days, we have seen this really through the coverage of the tribunal by Afghan media and for Afghans, and the response from the Afghan community at large. It's for creating that moment of hope. Because women of Afghanistan, people of Afghanistan, can't afford to lose hope. We really can't, right? We really need to know that this is not the end of our journey, that we are not forgotten, and that this regime is not forever. Every day we need to remind ourselves this. And this is particularly important for young women and girls who have been deprived of going to school for 4 years. Why should they continue to fight with their father for access to internet, to a cell phone, so that they can continue their classes online? Why should they continue to fight forced marriages and get into wars with their family members and with their community to not be married off, if they don't believe this will ever change? If they believe this is it, my only option is getting married, having children, this is the end of my life forever. Everyone has forgotten about me anyway. And we wanted to say, you're not being forgotten. Your stories are being heard by the world. This is your chance to speak. They're trying to silence you, but you're being heard. So this was also very, very important. Now, of course, the next step is what we will do with the verdict and the plans that we have. I have already spoken for too long.
And I mean, that was a wonderful introduction, and we will come back to what your hopes are for the tribunal in terms of outcomes. But let me turn to Azadeh. You're one of 4 prosecutors. Can you tell us a bit about how the process works, how the hearings have worked, and what your role was as a prosecutor?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak here. Thanks so much for the opportunity and your interest. When I was approached to be one of the 4 prosecutors, just probably a week before, I had heard from the announcement that there's going to be a People's Tribunal in the situation of women in Afghanistan. And I had absolutely loved that idea. And I was just about to write to Shahrzad to say good luck. And I think that's an absolutely good idea. But I was approached by one of the colleagues of Shahrzad that actually, if I could be one of the prosecutors. And I think I didn't even hesitate for a second. And I said, absolutely, yes. I think this is going to be a historic event. And it will be an honor and pleasure of my life to be prosecuting the Taliban on behalf of the people and the women of Afghanistan. And I think I had Shahrzad's colleague said that, do you want to think about it? I said, no, I actually thought about it probably. And I just wanted to be involved in this process. I think for me, why it was so important that I had deliberated 2 weeks prior to when it was announced until I was approached was that the people of Afghanistan, particularly the women of Afghanistan, was never given the opportunity to hold their perpetrators accountable, let it be the Taliban or other actors. And I thought that was the avenue for them to hold these perpetrators accountable, even if it's just a people's tribunal. And then people's tribunal for me is very powerful because people coming together to prosecute the alleged perpetrators for the crimes of international crimes or grave crimes that they have committed. Just having an avenue for the witnesses, for the victim survivor groups to come together to speak about the experiences, the things that happened to them was an absolute something that I really wanted to go ahead with. I was not sure if I could actually talk about the process of writing the indictment and also the testimonies and everyone. I think although we know that the People's Tribunal is actually more of like, it doesn't have the actual legal weight, like as a formal tribunal. It's a people's tribunal, and then it's a civil society initiative. But two things is really important that while we think that this is not an actual court, to remember is that, first of all, the indictment has the legal weight. The indictment is based on legal analysis. We had to look into the international crimes, especially the international crimes against humanity of gender-based persecution, and then also the grave violations of human rights treaties, which Afghanistan is a party to. So the indictment, if you have seen, it's announced by the website of the tribunal and also the organization, is the legal indictment that should be, and any formal court would actually issue such an indictment. And then also the witnesses, the testimonies that you heard, and then we had to go through a very lengthy process to prepare the testimonies. Probably for me personally, the indictment was a little bit of lighter process than the witness and testimonies preparation. The four organizations provided us with a less extensive list of possible witnesses, both from inside Afghanistan and also from people in exile. And then we had to go through the difficult decision of choosing who should be testifying there. There was a lot of different factors that we had to consider. I think the first and foremost was the security. As you know, that for people who from the audience who've been in the past 2 days in the tribunal, that most of the witnesses actually had to cover their faces, and the camera had to be off, or sometimes the voices had to be changed. So their security was the first priority for the organizations, for the civil society organizations, and for us as the prosecutors, because we know that the Taliban could potentially harm them or threaten their family members, and some of them have the immediate family members inside Afghanistan. So although they really wanted to testify, unfortunately we had to make the difficult decision to balance the threat that they might receive, the family members being immediate family members inside Afghanistan, and also what they had to say. So I think we had to make that decision, and also, but what for me was really profoundly incredible was that regardless of all these risks and also the experiences that they went through, and they knew that if in case something happens, they could be subject to the same atrocities, they were very much willing to testify. I remember at least 2 or 3 of them said that when I told them that probably you want to cover your face, you want to cover, like we use a pseudonym for you, we had an options for them that, these are the security mitigation and risk mitigation that we could do. Probably we could use a pseudonym for you, hide your voice, like we could present a written statement. So most of them said that who especially testified in person without any coverage, they said that we have nothing to lose. And our objective is now to expose what the Taliban really is, and to tell the world what we went through. And then we want to make sure that the voices of the women who are still going through the same atrocities inside Afghanistan to be heard. We feel this obligation, and we're obliged to do this, and we have nothing to hide. And I think for me that was really, really profound, because they have been arrested, they have been tortured, and they're still being threatened and intimidation from inside the Taliban by the Taliban while they're still living in outside. And most of them, of course, all of them are going through mental health traumas. I think that was one thing. And also from people from inside Afghanistan, and when you talk to them, it's just a different level of commitment to justice, commitment to be heard, commitment to expose what is going on for the realities. And most of them said that this initiative is giving us the voice and giving us the opportunity to speak up for our rights. And most of them said it's not for only our rights, but the rights of thousands and millions of Afghan women and girls across the country. What we couldn't do in this process was that physical evidence to be present to the court because of security reasons from so many other considerations that we had. But we have videos, We had hard evidences. We have pictures, photographs, because some of the women who were actually arrested by the Taliban, there's videos available of their arrest and the horrific situation that they went through. So two things are really, really important to consider, although this is a people's tribunal, is that the indictment is based on legal analysis and this is a legal document, and also the evidence and testimony of the witnesses that is actually based on how you would actually have in a formal court. And as a prosecutors, I think there's a last point I have to say is that we didn't have any influence over what they're going to say to us or what they're going to present to the court. The only thing that we had to guide them through was the 4 questions, like to make it sure that, because one thing is that we were talking with Shahzad this morning that in a way, all of the people of Afghanistan, probably a lot of Afghans in this room today, we kind of consider ourselves as victim survivor groups as well, right? Because we have directly and indirectly been affected by the conflicts in Afghanistan, by the Taliban's atrocity. But we had to guide our witnesses that you have to only focus in this aspect. You have to look into this because our case, the prime case, criminal case, was gender-based persecution. So we had to focus on one aspect of that. And then we had to guide them to probably focus in these 2 areas. And then based on guidelines that we have available in formal courts that probably go through these indictments, through this kind of process and then talk about this. Apart from that, we had no influence of what they're going to present. We had no influence of how they actually want to present this. I think no matter how many times you listen to their testimonies, no matter how many times you know what they're saying, you have seen their interviews, some of them, it never gets easy for you, right? It never gets easy that, because I think of so many times in the panel, I was trying to be very probably professional and not to show too many emotions, but I think it's impossible to just see someone experiencing that profound amount of atrocities and not be affected by it, and especially when you're an Afghan woman and you know how the realities are harsher for most of women inside the country right now.
Thank you. And it was very clear, actually, from all of the prosecutors that it was a balance of both the law and also, you know, your own emotional involvement and witnessing of the witnesses there. So you mentioned the indictment, and you ended the hearings yesterday with requests to the judges. Can you just tell us a bit about what you're hoping for the judges?
I think, as Shahzad also mentioned, that the ICC has issued arrest warrant for the 2 of Taliban leadership for the gender-based persecution. I think one of the thing for us is that, you know, international formal judicial system is inherent to have a lot of obstacles right now. So I think first and foremost for us is the recognition and confirmation that what is happening in Afghanistan to the women of Afghanistan right now is a form of gender-based persecution. That's first. And then second is that, which we will hope that, as Shahzad also mentioned, to assist with the formal investigation, not only at the ICC, but we have another principle of universal jurisdiction, which is really, really strong. And we understand, as Shahzad also mentioned, about normalization of Taliban members, right? And one of the witnesses also mentioned that some senior Taliban members have been traveling to some European countries. And so universal jurisdiction is there, and Europe has a lot of states within the European Union have active universal jurisdiction cases.
Can you just explain what your universal jurisdiction is?
Yes, absolutely. So universal jurisdiction is a principle that it holds, an international criminal law or international law in general. The concept of concept of jurisdiction is very complicated because there's a lot of political things involved. So if I'm, for example, Spain cannot prosecute someone from Italy unless they have a jurisdictional connection, right? So universal jurisdiction allows this principle. It's very much contested into some context internationally, but it allows another country to intervene to hold an alleged perpetrator accountable for international crimes. For example, if a member of Taliban right now travels to one of the countries internationally, particularly in Europe, that have universal jurisdiction, that country could have the jurisdiction to investigate that individual. For example, whether they're head of state, whether they're senior within the senior leadership, so they lose, agreeably, they lose immunity over that, and they can be investigated on those countries and be held criminally accountable. This is the rationale for universal jurisdiction comes from the concept that to end impunity. For example, if Taliban, there was no accountability for them under national mechanism, under Afghanistan's judicial system. If they're traveling to another country, even for a meeting or even for official visit, they can be held accountable under universal jurisdiction. And for that, a lot of other work should be done before, because case building, identifying of the individuals, and civil society organizations, Afghanistan's diaspora community can be instrumental in those kind of cases. And we have recently seen a lot of cases for Syria, for example, for Yazidis that have been successful conviction of under universal jurisdiction as well. And the role of civil society organizations have been extremely important. So I think another request of the prosecutors and the people of Afghanistan is the codification of gender apartheid. I think a little bit elaboration on what gender apartheid is. So the term gender, you know what apartheid is, right? When it's extreme segregation based on race. And then when the Taliban came for the first time in power in the 1990s, they imposed exactly the same measures on the people and the women of Afghanistan. So some of the human rights defenders, particularly women from Afghanistan, then referred to their experience under the Taliban's rule as being gender apartheid. They said that this is a form of apartheid, but based on gender. And then they had a few meetings internationally, conferences, legal analysis to see how could we actually look into criminalization of this. But for us, thankfully, then that Taliban was withdrawn, and then there was no need to actually pursue this advocacy. But unfortunately, with the return of Taliban 4 years ago, they saw the need to actually move for it to codify gender apartheid as well, because the Taliban Taliban imposed similar restrictions on women, even harsher this time. And so they started saw the need to codify gender apartheid under international law, and then also that there's a policy reason and also legal reason for that. Policy reason is that I don't think any of us Afghans, we want any kind of war in Afghanistan again, so right? So we want a policy or like political intervention to topple, for example, the Taliban, or to have a government in Afghanistan to be representing human rights, democratic values. So I think we see it through kind of similar intervention internationally. And then for legal reasoning, we have gender-based persecution, and then we have racial discrimination, right? So we see that they actually complement gender-based persecution and gender apartheid could complement each other to have a more robust international legal protection for gendered crimes. And just ending with this, because what we see as an international criminal scholar, what I see is that gendered aspects of international crime, it took very long to be crystallized in international law. For example, look at other similar crimes, for example, genocide. We didn't know that genocide could have a major gender aspects until the 1990s, beginning of 1990s, that when we had the horrible Rwandan genocide and also the former Yugoslavia, that we knew that, okay, what happened to women in this situation, right? And similar, we have a lot of pushbacks. We have a lot of probably more advocacy to do. So one of the asks of the prosecutors and then the organization and the women of Afghanistan is that recognition and codification of gender apartheid as an international crime. And then documentation for what is happening in Afghanistan, and not to normalize what is happening in Afghanistan, as Shahrazad said, but based on cultural relativism and also religion. Thank you.
Thank you. So Shahrazad, that's the hope from the judges. What's your wider hope in terms of engagement or politics?
Thank you, Rachel. Well, I think one thing that we really hope to do with the verdict is to really make it a tool for the Afghan civil society at large, for the Afghan activists and for allies of Afghanistan, right? People who care about issues of gender equality, and people who care about women's rights, and people who care about women. I mean, the situation of Afghanistan really should move everyone, I think. This can just be a tool. You can do so much with it. We can't do it on our own. So we hope to take this verdict or judgment and use it as a starting point to have conversations with countries in the region, with civil society in the region particularly. And I really want to emphasize the region, because I think I'm saying this just for our own journey. I don't want to judge the whole human rights community of Afghanistan, but I think just the work that we had done in Afghanistan prior to the fall of Kabul, as part of the human rights community, we had really focused a lot on a Western audience, and we hadn't done enough to go beyond that. And I really see the People's Tribunal as an opportunity to create some of those openings. And already with this process, we have tried. You have seen the panel of judges. Rashida Manjoo is presiding. She's from South Africa. This was very important. We didn't choose the panel of judges. The PPT did, but we did convey to the PPT that we want a diverse panel of judges. And we do want women from Islamic backgrounds as well on the panel of judges. So you also see that in the composition of the panel. Because yes, what Taliban do? Permanent People's Tribunal. Permanent People's Tribunal. So what I hope we can do in the next stage, and also in the lead up to the tribunal, we also reached out to several countries strategically, to civil society in several countries strategically, to see if we can somehow involve them in the process. Right? It's an Afghan process first of all, but also we want to have audiences. So we worked with Indonesian civil society a little bit, particularly the Congress of Women Ulama of Indonesia, who had a representative yesterday in the tribunal, who also delivered a testimony, an expert testimony. And we really wanted them to hear directly from women of Afghanistan and to see what's happening in Afghanistan for themselves through these testimonies, and to see if they're interested in collaborating with us to get this message to religious schools in Indonesia, because there are religious schools as part of this network, and religious scholars in Indonesia, because Taliban have engaged with Indonesia, have spoken with Indonesia, and they have heard that side of the story. And we wanted them to hear our side of the story and stand with us. And then potentially, in, for instance, International Court of Justice case, join Afghanistan. It is also create a small opening there. And I think we have them created that small opening. A lot more work needs to be done. So hopefully, I'm hoping that we can do a trip to Indonesia following the judgment, to meet with the civil society there, to have conversations about the judgment, about the testimonies, about the tribunal. Similarly, with South Africa, we have had very good media coverage of the tribunal in South Africa, because also Rashida. And
if I could just say on the Indonesian component, she was an Islamic scholar, wasn't she?
Yes.
And she made a call herself to the Organization of Islamic States.
Yes, absolutely. So the significance of the testimony from Dr. Noor yesterday was that she's an Islamic scholar, and her language was completely a religious language, right? It wasn't a human rights language. She wasn't saying this is all based on international law. She said, based on principles of Islam, based on Quran, based on Sunnah, what Taliban are doing are not in line with Islam. She very clearly said, this is in contradiction with Islamic Sharia. She used the word Sharia. And this is very, very powerful for our audience in Afghanistan as well, because people are constantly being fed this narrative that you were not living as Muslims before, and now you're living as true Muslims. And so it's very important for us, for people to hear that. And she also made a call, as you said, on an Organization of Islamic States, Organization of Islamic Countries, OIC, which we have been trying to engage in our advocacy, trying to find ways to have a briefing to them. Just get in a room with us, please, and listen to that we have to say privately. We are not asking, it's not a big ask, just listen to our story as well. So that aspect is very, very important to us as requesting organizations, and we are hoping that we can put some time and thought and resources into making sure that that judgment opens a conversation with civil society in Pakistan, with civil society in Qatar, with civil society in Indonesia, with civil society in South Africa, and sort of mobilizes that. And of course, the other aspect of it is we are now a displaced people. We have been a displaced people for over 40 years because of the war. But this means that we have big diaspora and exile and refugee communities in different parts of the world. And my call to all civil society so far has been, and they have been very excited by this process, is that go to your local MP with this judgment. You're in Netherlands, go to the MP that is, outspoken on women's rights, and take the judgment and use this as a conversation to get her or him activated on Afghanistan, on women's rights in Afghanistan. Do this in Canada, do this in the UK, do this in Portugal, do this in wherever you are, do this in Indonesia, wherever you are. So in that way also it will require a lot of work, but that's what I'm hoping to do, a little bit.
I'm going to come to the audience shortly for questions, so start thinking of your questions. But you mentioned the huge diaspora. I was really struck by the numbers of people engaging online with the process. This wasn't just here in Madrid, this was in the virtual realm, and there was a lot of engagement there, wasn't there?
Yes, absolutely. So the engagement and the response from Afghanistan is very important. The survivors who spoke kept showing us photos of people watching them on TV in Afghanistan. And this was such a big moment for them, that people in Afghanistan in their living rooms were watching them and hearing their testimonies. We were very lucky and we are very grateful to our media in exile that despite being in exile and having very limited resources themselves, they worked so hard to cover this. they really worked so hard. We had small media organizations that were trying to cover, and we have a very vibrant and very strong media in exile. And all of them put resource into it. Some of them just streamed our live stream. Some of them sent reporters. Many of them apologized because they couldn't send reporters for resource and visa issues, but they were following the live stream and doing in-depth articles. The newspapers did in-depth articles and analysis. The TVs were showing. So 2 days we were live on TV. Basically, the whole process was live on TV. And we got into one moment. I was looking at the live stream of live broadcast of the TV on Twitter. There were 39,000 viewers at that moment. At the end of the first day, my colleague did an analysis, and he said that in various platforms we had over 2,200 viewers the first day of the tribunal at that moment. And of course, some people then caught up later with the time zone and everything. And then there was a response online. We have already, I was telling Azada this morning, have received messages saying, let's do a people's court about this issue. Let's do because it's a new process for Afghans. So of course, there have been so many atrocities, so many perpetrators. I think the strongest criticism we have heard is, why is this not about this other atrocity as well? Why don't you talk about former security forces being killed and tortured by the Taliban? And why are you not talking about the crimes of Mujahideen? And where's the People's Tribunal on the crimes of American forces in Afghanistan? It's not like we don't know like this. It's like, we love this format. Why am I not part of it? Why is my testimony not being heard? And yeah, that has been really overwhelming, and also reaffirming that also your shoulders feel heavy because it's, but we do have a strong civil society, and our offer has been, even throughout this process, you work on a people's court on the issue that matters most to you, and you have most expertise, and we are here to support you in any way we can. We just took the first step. So that has been very important. The past 2 days have been so much news. So, the ceasefire, thank God, in Gaza, and last night, unfortunately, Pakistani rockets in Afghanistan, the beginning of the week, the investigative mechanism. So we were worried about the media coverage. But even this morning, when I went to Afghan online, all Afghans are talking about the People's Tribunal, survivors and perpetrators and just ordinary people as well.
Please, yeah.
I just wanted to add one more thing, that last night when I got back to my hotel, I was very tired. When you're involved in a process like this, so heavy, so emotional, so personal, you don't think about the impact immediately right now, right? You just want to go and take off your shoes and sit on your bed for a second. The moment I was connected to the internet, I had a message from one of my second cousins in Afghanistan, who I don't hear much from. And because in the past 2 weeks as well, we had an internet blackout. So Taliban actually blacked out the whole internet in the country. And now they have restricted social media access to in a lot of social media platforms as well. He wrote me that, "We are very proud of you. Please continue." And then I had another message. Thank you. Thanks. And then I had another message. I'm coming from a small district in one of the southern provinces of Afghanistan that I had to leave very early on in the 1990s when I was very young, and I don't remember much because I also couldn't go back there when I was working in Afghanistan. There's a school that my family was a little bit involved with, and I know that that school went into become a high school. It was a primary school when I was there. And then girls cannot go to school anymore, as you know, right? And to high school. So there's informal high school set up, and then we as members of diaspora contribute a little bit for the computer, money for internet and things like that, so they could continue informally. The coordinator for that school said that we had watch parties, like we all get together, and we had to go into the top of this hill, and we had to watch some of these sessions there, allowing time and internet connection and everything. So our voices are also here in those corners of Afghanistan that usually we don't have access to much.
Thank you. I could have lots more questions, but I don't want to hog you. We've got a nice room full of people with questions, I hope. Are there any questions in the room for Shahzad or Azada? Yes, thank you there. There's a mic over there. Do we want this on mic? Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing. It's been extremely touching to hear your thoughts and kind of your experiences and the motivations and the hopes that you're headed to. I just was wondering why you decided to do this event in Madrid, and also about the timing, right? Because you're talking about kind of this desire to expand beyond Europe and the US, but again, we're in Europe today. Maybe Madrid's a good target because nobody really comes here that much. So I was curious about that. And you mentioned the mechanism. Maybe I will just clarify that this past week, there was a mechanism that was established at the Human Rights Council in Geneva that will investigate crimes against humanity in Afghanistan, right? And so how is the People's Tribunal outcomes also going to be able to feed into that process? And then maybe going beyond women's rights. I mean, you mentioned that there were all these people that were complaining that they don't have their own People's Tribunal, right? So I'm just wondering if there are any other groups that are trying to address that, and what are the biggest kind of thoughts from Afghan men who are also supporting women in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Three good questions. Who wants to start? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. On why Madrid? We are very pleased to be in Madrid, and we have received incredible support to be here. Madrid Bar Association is our partner, our local partner. I want to acknowledge that. Colleagues in Casa Asia have been helpful, and Spanish media have really covered the tribunal. So I'm really grateful for that. But initially, when we started, this has been a very hectic journey as well, because we submitted a petition to Permanent People's Tribunal in December for Afghan organizations. We got a response accepting our petition in February, and now it's October. In the space of this time, we decided on the prosecutors, indictment was developed, victims were identified, civil society links were made, media was on everything, so it has been a lot. So I think if we do this another time, we will give it a year. Realistically, it's just too much. We were exhausted. It takes more. It just needs more time, particularly with preparing the witnesses and all of that. But as soon as we heard that it's accepted, we started thinking about the venue. Where do you want to have this? And we wanted to have it as soon as we had made them. We had a press release following the acceptance before organization saying, we have had the acceptance and there will be a People's Tribunal. So I think late February, I don't know, we had a sort of an announcement, and we didn't want the attention to die out. So we knew that there is a need to sustain attention in the midst of everything that's happening, and we wanted to keep the momentum going as well. We'll do it as soon as we can. So then also we started reaching out to different countries, thinking about different countries. Should we go to Jordan? Hold this in Jordan? Should we hold? There were a few considerations. One, the survivors who can somewhat safely speak publicly are in Europe. For the survivors in the region, we have constant deportations from Pakistan, from Iran, from Turkey. So if someone speaks in the tribunal and then they are deported to Afghanistan, he couldn't risk that. So one I think was that they're mostly in Europe. So it's easier. And not only they're mostly in Europe, they have visa limitations. Travel documents, Afghan passports, they're still figuring out their refugee status. So it's hard to also take them out of Europe and then bring them back and risk that process in some way, create extra stress for them, or get the visas. Indonesia, for instance, they said the government is not supportive. We approached Indonesian civil society. They said the government is not a good government right now. We don't know if we can get visas for survivors on time for the event. And we were like, okay, well, that's out. Several other countries, I think we didn't get a proper response because they were politically hesitant. What's this? What does this mean with the Taliban? How will it impact our relationship with the Taliban? And we don't need the government's endorsement. We actually don't want it, the host government. But their awareness in many of the countries in the region, without their awareness and their support, really political, at least no political objection, you can't hold an event like this with media and everything. So then we decided Europe. And Europe, Spain, why? Because of its position on Gaza as well. This was very important to us. We wanted a country that's not hypocritical, doesn't have double standards when it comes to international accountability. And we admire Spain's position on Gaza and Palestine. So that was one of the reasons that they end up there. And
on the mechanism, I mean, Human Rights Watch has done quite a lot of advocacy on the mechanism. So I'm It's been a very collective effort. You wanted to know how this connects, or just a little bit?
How is it going to be? How's it going to, I don't know, are they on it?
Yeah.
Okay. I also remembered your second question about what other tribunals. The format of people's tribunals is a new format for Afghanistan. It hasn't been utilized by Afghan civil society before. Before this, we did some work. We have published a very extensive FAQ on people's tribunals in Farsi and Pashtun in local languages. We did consultations with women inside Afghanistan because we didn't want the tribunal happening. They're like, what's this? Why am I hearing about this in the news? So we organized consultations, online consultations with women in different parts of Afghanistan. We did consultations with civil society. What do you want to see in this tribunal? What topic do you want to see? So we have done some work, but still, until you see something in reality, it doesn't really sink in. But now that people have seen it, now there are a lot of different ideas. So one very concrete idea, because we had a network of media organizations present there, they already approached us saying, we want to do one for journalists, and can we do it together with you, since you guys have done it? So that's one immediate idea. But before even holding this, for us in Al-Waduri, we really, because our team is a team that before worked with the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission and documented a lot of violations, including war crimes or international forces. We have colleagues who have been to Uruzgan, for instance, and have documented allegations about Australian forces, to Helmand about British forces, about American forces. So one idea is to have a people's tribunal on that. That idea has been around for some time, and we have been thinking about it. But I don't know when we'll get there. So there are a few issues. We have also had several. Last night was about the Soviets, for instance. The message that I received about was this massacre by the Soviets as they were leaving the village. And this person is currently in Iran. He's like, I know the survivors, and like, let me just breathe. Next week, maybe. So yeah, those are. And the accountability mechanism, we really hope this informs it. But we also. Here I'm not speaking for the requesting organizations. I'm speaking just for Al-Waduri myself. I'm just very anxious that for political reasons they will limit the scope somehow, and when it comes to actual implementation, I really do hope they don't leave international forces out or deprioritize them, because we have nothing else right now looking at those allegations, and those are serious allegations. And in fact, in some ways, it's easier to talk to survivors security-wise, because, well, the de facto authorities wouldn't really mind that. So it is an opportunity. I really do hope and will advocate for the mechanism to, but also, of course, we hope they're informed by this tribunal as well.
Okay, I think we've already got time for one more question. I've got somebody at the back there.
Should I?
Sorry, somebody's already got the mic. Okay, yeah okay. We'll try and take two questions together then, if we can also pass it to the lady in the back.
Okay. I want to know if you know anything about how these women were reached, if they were mostly in exile in Europe, or were there any written testimonies of women in Afghanistan, how, if they get to know the process and they reach the direction of this process directly, or if they were reached in another way, maybe by family members or any other situation.
Right, thank you. Can we just pass the mic back to the lady there, and we'll just take her question, and we'll respond to both of those together. Yeah.
First of all, I want to congratulate the team for this fundamental movement. I am Sunita Nasser Tarin, an Afghan woman. For me, it was very impressive and a privilege being in the first day and hearing the testimony of the Afghan woman. I congratulate you all for this movement. My question is how tribunal can ensure that international actors who have contributed in the crisis, international actors who have turned their back to Afghanistan, and that Afghanistan is not now in their agenda through policy failures or through neglection, are also examined in the pursuit of justice in this tribunal.
Thank you. Okay, just briefly then, do you want to take the first point?
Yes, sure. I think I understood the first question was about selection of witnesses, right? How did we select witnesses? Fortunately for the prosecutors is that the 4 organizations, at least 2 of them, all of them, but 2 of them mainly working very closely with a lot of victim survivor groups from Afghanistan for different crimes, documenting their testimonies and everything. So this list, a very extensive list with codes and everything was provided by them, both from outside Afghanistan and inside Afghanistan. So for prosecutors' job, half of the work was done, but then we had to look into we had a list of priorities and lists of things, like security was the foremost, particularly from people from inside Afghanistan, and then to select those witnesses based on the legal analysis or the indictment that we had and their stories and everything. We had to make those decisions. But because of security, even most of them said that we don't have anything major concern, but we had to advise them that if they want to actually not to testify in person, not to show their face, not to have not to live broadcast their faces, we had to make measures. But most of these people actually still receives intimidation, harassment, trolls online. One thing is really significant about Taliban is that they are very much present online. So if you see a lot of messages, for example, misinformation, propaganda messages about how peaceful Afghanistan is, the rights of women and everything, is a propaganda mechanism by the Taliban. So they are still being intimidated by the Taliban. So we had a few witnesses withdrawing a week before the tribunal, and then we had to find a replacement. But good is that when we selected the list of witnesses, we knew that what will happen, because it's very natural to such cases, and we know who we're dealing with. So we had backups that we had interviewed them, we had selected them, and we had verified their testimonies, and then we had to also look into security issues for them. So we had very quickly we had to replace them, and then I just applaud the organizations to manage to bring them here because there was a lot of logistical issues. They couldn't travel. At least a few of them, but one of them that the story stuck with me was supposed to come join us from Switzerland, but she couldn't because she didn't have the required documentation for traveling, which was a really pity because she was someone who also, for the people who were in the tribunal, that she wanted to send a message to her children in Afghanistan who are stuck there. So she really wanted to come. She was saying that this is kind of me communicating with my kids as well back home, which is under the Taliban. In other questions, Sonia Jan, very pleased to have you here. I think it was about how the Afghanistan shouldn't fall from the international attention and Afghanistan is drifting away, right? In terms of diplomatic and policy reasons?
But the question was how we can cause the international community accountable for the crime.
International forces.
It's not just standards.
For security.
Oh, no. International forces or international diplomats?
International diplomats.
Okay.
Because it's not just Taliban.
Yeah.
Right. Happening of Afghan women is not just because of the Taliban.
You're absolutely right. Yes. I think that it was discussed yesterday by one of the witnesses as well, that she was very shocked to come into one of the countries in Europe and see that Taliban diplomats were there, particularly one person of interest to us, especially working in universal jurisdiction, that he was there while he was convicted by Afghanistan's domestic courts, and he had a live televised confession about planning and carrying out a lot of suicide attacks that was affected by at least a few hundred of Afghans, thousands of Afghans potentially. So we are very, I think we're looking into very shocked and overwhelmed. Sometimes we see international diplomats, particularly from countries who have feminist foreign policies, going to Afghanistan, shaking hands with the Taliban, trying to justify to us that it could be okay, it could be fine, things like that. And I think one thing that they should remember is that what is happening in Afghanistan is not only affecting the women of Afghanistan. It will go far beyond Afghanistan's border, and it will affect the whole entire international community. And also the universality of rights, right? We cannot say that human rights is only for particular people. Human rights is only for this. Human rights are universal. Even UN says that this is based on a kind of a UN document and principles that even if culture is harmful, it shouldn't be practiced, right? Even if religion is harmful, it shouldn't be practiced. Not religion, but culture, right? We cannot hide behind cultural relativism. So I think it is the obligation of international community, the diplomatic community, to actually hold the Taliban accountable for these international ongoing atrocities that is being committed in Afghanistan, because human rights and international law are universal. And we cannot say that this particular person, women of Afghanistan, are going out of this radar.
I'm really sorry, I can see quite a few hands up. I'm going to let Shahzad have a last word. I would, but we do actually have to get back to the judges' preliminary hearing, so we are really time constrained this morning. Sorry, otherwise I would bend the time a little. But I'm going to give you the last word.
Sunita John, just to add to what Azada said, we invited the embassies in Madrid of different countries, particularly those who are trying to normalize with the Taliban, to come to the testimonies. They didn't come, but we really invited them because we wanted them to come and hear directly from the survivors. And we sent the live stream link as well to several of the embassies. There was an invitation, I know this is interesting for Afghans and important for Afghans, for the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, including the Secretary General's representative to Afghanistan. They were formally notified, they were informed, and UNAMA Human Rights was actually planning to come, but then they end up not coming. But they have all of them were given the opportunity to hear directly, and we will make sure that we'll go back to them and share again the indictments, the testimonies, and finally the verdict to shame them a little, at least.
Yeah. So apologies for not having more time. There's obviously a lot more we could hear from both Shahzad and Azada. And I also want to acknowledge that we didn't mention the other organizations who were involved in this. So the Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, ARDO, is one of the 4 requesting organizations. DROPS has been doing an amazing job with all the social media and many other aspects of the work, and HRD+.
Yes.
And also the Permanent People's Tribunal itself, which is a very established, respected organization. It's actually based in Italy, and it's been doing people's tribunals for decades now. So credit to all of the organizations. This was an amazing collaborative effort. So I'm sure you'll want to join me. You've seen how extraordinary both these women are. I need to get them back to the judges now so that we can hear the preliminary statement. Please look at the People's Tribunal website online and follow what happens with the preliminary hearing, judgment this morning, and then we'll be coming back to hear from the judges for their final verdict in December. So you'll be hearing more from this process. And from what it sounds like, there's going to be more People's Tribunals to come for Afghans. So thank you very much to Shahzad Akbar and to Azada Rez Mohammed and to Casa Asia and Casa Arab for this event. And thank you all for joining.